These are assembly instructions for my trio of cats. I have my cats in 3 sizes and they pretty much go together the same way. So this is the medium size that you're looking at. I've already folded down on all the score lines. Now you'll also see some score lines here. This is to help me position the eyes properly. I'm putting glue on one of the long tabs from the score line to the very end. And then I'm taking my other piece and I am matching the cut edge of the piece on my right to the score line of the tab where I've just put glue. And I want the tops and the bottoms to be nice and even. And then I have my 2 eyes. So the white is 65-pound cardstock and the black is vinyl. There are score lines on the eyes themselves to apply the vinyl. So I'm putting glue on the underside and just gluing them down, following the guidelines that I've scored into my panel. And then I'm going to flip my panel over and I've got this other piece. I folded down on all the score lines for it. Now the score lines for the tabs all get folded downwards, but that center tab gets folded upwards in a V, like so. So there are 4 identical tabs. I'm putting glue on one of those tabs from the score line to the end. And then I'm matching up my tab with that triangular cutout that's on my cat piece. I want these score lines to be even, and the center score line has to match up with the peak of this triangle. And I want the cut edge to go right along the score line of that tab. And then I'm putting glue along that second tab from the score line to the edge, and then I'm matching up the tab on the other side, and again I want the cut edge of that front panel to go right along the score line of the tab. And then I'm going to flip my piece over. So I have tabs on either side. I'm putting glue on one of the tabs and then folding over the side and gluing that tab right to the side. And then I'm going to take one of the long strips that I have. Now I've cut this out of 110-pound cardstock. I used black for the other 2 cats, but I'm using orange for this one so you can see what I'm doing. I'm covering the underside of it in glue, and then I'm sneaking it onto the side that I have just glued in. Now that that tab is glued in place, I can put my reinforcement piece on top. And it kind of covers that tab and it makes my side a little sturdier. Next, I'm putting glue on those 2 other tabs that are on the other side. Before I close it, I've got another reinforcement piece. This is the shortest of the reinforcement pieces. I'm gluing it down to the left-hand side of my little V shape on the inside. And then I'm going to do that on the right-hand side as well. It's easier to glue these in place before you glue your box shut. So I put glue on these 2 and I'm folding my side down in place. I want the cut edges of my V to be right along the score line. I still have access to the inside, and I'm going in there with my bone folder and I'm spreading all that glue. So there's 2 of these in the file, one for the back and one for the front. I'm just covering this one in glue. I'm inserting it inside my box. Just glued it down to the interior like so. And then I have the second tab at the top. And I have the long tab along the side. I'm just putting glue all over it. I'm tucking both of those tabs inside my shape. Oops, trying not to get glue everywhere. And I'm gluing that tab down. My bone folder isn't quite long enough, so I'm using a craft dowel and I'm going in right to the end and making sure that those tabs are glued down properly. And then I have a reinforcement piece. I'm putting glue on the underside of it. And then I'm carefully inserting it into the interior of my box, trying to place it as centered as possible. And then again going in there and spreading my glue. And then I have a long strip for the interior of the side as well. And I'm just inserting that long strip and then spreading my glue. And I have one more strip to put on the closure. So this is the bottom of my box. So I'm just gluing that down, trying to center it within the score lines in the edge. And then I fold up the flaps and close my box. And so that's the smallest and the medium size. And for the larger size, these pieces are 11.5 inches long, which means that these parts have to be added. The side tabs and the bottom closure piece are separate. So I've already folded down on the score lines and glued in that top piece, at least on the 2 tabs. And I'm going to add these tabs here. I have one of the small side tabs. I've folded on the score line to create the tab that will help me attach it. So I'm just putting the score line right along the edge and then gluing that in between the score lines of my side. And then I'm doing that with the second one as well. The score line of my tab should be right against the edge of my piece. And then I have that bottom piece. The tab is at the top, the rounded part is at the bottom. I'm putting glue all over the tab. I'm gluing the score line of the tab right to the cut edge of the lower part of my piece. Next I'm going to glue in my reinforcement piece, and I cut it in black for this one. I cut this one out of craft board because my 110-pound cardstock is 11 inches long. So it wasn't quite long enough, but you could certainly cut this in 2 pieces. You could create a slice midpoint and then cut this out in 2 pieces. So I'm just laying this down, and then I'm going to put glue on the tab that's on the right hand side, and then I'm folding that side upwards. And then I have the 2 short pieces to reinforce the top. And then I have a long strip to reinforce one of the sides. So I'm going to be reinforcing the side where I've already glued in the tab. So next I'm gluing in the tab on the left-hand side at the top. And then I'm putting glue on the other long strip and gluing it down. And then I'm putting glue on the tabs that are at the top, and then all along the side tab. And then I'm folding the top panel over, making sure that the cut lines go right along the score lines of all tabs. And then there's my second large reinforcement piece. I'm just carefully inserting it into my box, trying to center it as best I can. And then I'm going in there and I'm spreading that glue. And then my last reinforcement piece on the bottom of my box, and just gluing that between the score lines, trying to center it as best I can. And it seals up exactly like the 2 other boxes. So now I just have this thick garden twine. I'm gonna leave a tail, kind of wrapping the layers on top of one another. And then snipping off a decent tail. Try to center a bow under the eyes, like so. So I'm just cutting off the excess. I've got the small one and the medium one. I'm going to do the same thing with the large one.